We all want to run faster, but we also know the golden rule when it comes to running is to show up on the bad days as well as the good days. But there are a few things we can do to help ourselves that'll make us become faster runners pretty darn quickly. A little routine change here and a training philosophy change there can make all the difference. So let's get straight into it. Fueling for injury prevention is going to be the first thing that I want to talk about, and hopefully these 5 tips today are going to be things that are slightly different to some of the other tips you might see on other videos, because I'm trying to think a little bit outside the box here. Things that really helped me over the last 6 to 12 months that made a noticeable difference in my running, and this is really one of them. So I used to take great pride in the fact that I used to do a lot of my runs fasted, a lot of my sessions fasted, and a lot of my long runs fasted, or if you don't like the word fasted, then I guess a lot of my runs on an empty tank, not having breakfast, get up early and get out the door. And for me, what I found over time is that's fine on easy runs and moderate runs where the intensity is rather on the lower end of the spectrum. But when it comes to these faster intensity things, runs like I used to find with the sessions and the long runs, I often find towards the end I get rather fatigued. And with fatigue comes injury. Why? Because obviously our form can completely deteriorate in that last section of the run, and that last section of the session, the last rep, the last few miles, whatever it might be. When we fatigue, it's really hard to hold form. We get a bit sloppy, we get a bit lazy. And I did often find that I would sometimes get injured or feel a bit of a tweak or a niggle towards some of the end of those sessions. What I found now is by fueling them a lot better, whether that's just with gels or whether that's if I've got time to get some real food down my stomach, it's made the world of difference for me not to feel fatigued towards the end of a session. It's made the difference when I get home to want to fuel correctly. When I'm fatigued and I haven't fueled, I often want to eat the kitchen cupboards. Literally whatever I see, I want to eat. I'm a lot more logical about my food choices after those runs, and that's also making the world of difference. So it's a double-edged sword there. I appreciate it's easier for a lot of us with sensitive stomachs to go out there and not have food in our stomach, but on the flip side, that injury prevention and then eating smartly afterwards has made a massive benefit to my running. Strength and conditioning to address our weaknesses is the second thing that I just have to highlight. I find it, and used to find it, quite frustrating when I watch running tutorial videos and tips videos that talked about strength and conditioning, because as a runner I really wasn't that interested in that side of things. I just wanted to run and just assumed that if I ran more I'd get better, a little bit more bulletproof and a bit more injury free. But that's just not the case, and especially as I've progressed through my own running journey and speak to so many of you guys out there who have gone through yours, the benefits of strength and conditioning is humongous. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you have to jump into a massive undertaking of strength and conditioning alongside what you're already doing with running. For me at the moment, I'm making sure I do a couple of sessions a week. Well, I'm doing 3 sessions a week at the moment, but that's split between core and upper body. I'm getting 2 core sessions done, and if I can, 2 upper body, but 1 upper body at worst. But when I wasn't marathon training, I was doing 3 sessions of each a week, core, legs and upper body, really hammering the strength and conditioning, and that's exactly what I'll do once marathon training is over. Why is that? Because a lot of my injuries, now again I speak to a lot of you guys out there, a lot of our injuries I should say, caused us so many problems when it comes to trying to be consistent with running. Mine in particular was the fact that I have such a weak upper back. I would hunch over, I'm 6'6", I'm really tall. My weak upper back meant that I would shrug the shoulders, start to run like this, shuffle the shoulders, I'd crunch up in my diaphragm area, that would stop working properly and stitches would happen. I'd struggle to take on fuel, I'd struggle to take on liquids, whatever it might be, I just struggle. That has been a massive difference and benefit over the last few months since I've been training with more targeted strength and conditioning work to work on that, and I've had some really successful long runs with fueling on board and fluids as well. I'm not saying the problem's fixed. It's going to be a good 2 or 3 years before I really get on top of this, but it's a big start, and I can't recommend highly enough, if you have a weakness, to jump on it straight away. Structuring your training into blocks or periodizing your training is the third thing that I've got to bring up. Now, this does not apply to those of you out there who just love to run for the sake of running, and you just get out that door and it makes you feel great and happy and it's your exercise for the day, and that is that. I take my hat off to you. I wish I was a lot more casual like you about running than I feel I am, but this does not apply to you. This applies to the people that are looking to progress, to kind of take their times down and work on getting a little bit faster. And structuring your training is just so key. Whether you look at it from a perspective of doing different blocks of training or training for different speeds and distances, something has got to be put in place for you to achieve that. So I look on one side of the coin, I've got, shall I look at doing something like a strength block where I might incorporate more hills and a lot more undulating work and just basically not really touching too much of the VO2 max top end work, but really working on that aerobic base, like base building, but putting in a lot of strength stuff as well with the hills on top? Do I look at doing some kind of speed block where I'm really focusing on that top end, or do I work on something more like a marathon block, a more longer speed endurance block? Do I work in that basis and cycle through those 3 blocks, or do I want to do something like focus on a 10k and do a dedicated block for 10k training, then a half marathon, then a marathon, and cycle back round? Because ultimately what we want to do over the course of a year or 18 months or 2 years, however long you want, is to target different areas of our running, because in order to develop as a runner, we need to become strong in all of those areas. I know where my weakness is, and I guess a lot of you guys know where your weaknesses are. We all have our strengths somewhere. Mine is I'm much better at shorter distance like 10Ks and 5Ks. Well, I hate 5Ks, but 10Ks. But my weakness is definitely my marathon. Despite the fact that I love a long run, speed endurance is a struggle for me. Whereas I know a lot of you guys are incredible at marathons, but need to work on that top end speed to bring your 10k time down. So cycling through blocks with a purpose is absolutely key to progressing. Taking your recovery seriously is the 4th thing that I want to bring up today. It kind of leads on from point number 1, where I was talking about fueling for injury prevention. I want to extract that point I mentioned earlier by saying, when I fuel, I feel like I get back from a run and I don't feel like I need to eat everything in the kitchen cupboards. I just know what I should be eating and I can take it from there. Don't get me wrong, my diet is not the best, but I have made a massive change in my diet in the fact that when I do finish a good session or a long run, I do make sure I eat a good balance of protein and carbs and fats where I can. Don't get me wrong, it's not always the healthy fats. It can often be a bacon and egg sandwich, a vegetarian bacon and egg sandwich, because I am a vegetarian. But whatever it is, I do try and think to myself, I want to get in some protein, some carbs. It doesn't always have to be healthy, but it's for me got to be something that's balanced, rather than eating something really high processed sugar, some crisps or whatever else I might fancy if I don't fuel. And that kind of goes part way to recovering. I'm not saying that's the best, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to give nutritional advice here. I'm just going to share what my thoughts are post-run. From there, I'm always thinking about what can I do next. Do I need to massage using a foam roller or a massage gun? Do I use my Pure Sport massage balm? What do I need to do? At what level do I feel my recovery's at? Because after an easy run, I tend to just do some light stretches, same as a moderate run. It's when I get to the aftermath of a session or a long run that I feel the need to go a little bit deeper with recovery. So that does start with the fueling. But then, of course, what I tend to do is go with a massage gun, and then I use my Pure Sport recovery balm, and I use the Gua Sha tool, which is the metal tool you may or may not have seen me use in a video. Hydrating is also key, because what I'm doing with the Gua Sha, I'm putting the muscle balm on, which is anti-inflammatory, is kind of scraping down and breaking up those muscle fibers, because they can get a little bit sticky, especially the more dehydrated we are. So by breaking those up, they can move through their sheaths better, and they can recover faster, especially with the balm that I put on. Then if I make sure I hydrate, that again helps the muscles to recover even more. So I'm always using electrolyte tablets from Bix Hydration, usually not sponsored, just saying I tend to use those. I'm also experimenting with Precision Hydration electrolyte drinks as well, and then of course trying to drink plenty after the run as well. So recovery is absolutely key. I'm finding it essential and crucial to keep on top of that with marathon training, but also in the previous block I was doing a lot of that as well, really dialing in and trying to get that nailed on. And learning to run by feel and learning to listen to our body is the 5th and final thing that I just have to mention today. And this, going back to the intro of the video, is what I was talking about with a training philosophy change. So I'm not saying ditch your technology. I'm not saying stop what you're doing and completely change, because it's great to have technology. It's great to have data. It's fantastic to have all of this at our disposal. What I do fear, and I do see a lot of, especially when I'm in races, is people permanently checking their watches, people permanently relying on data to tell them how they're doing rather than listening to their body and tell themselves. Quick update for me personally in terms of changes I've made. Turned auto lap off on the watch, did that through my London Marathon training last summer. An absolute godsend. Wasn't looking at the mile splits because it wasn't beeping, was just looking at the overall average pace at the end of a run. However, during that block, I still did turn auto lap on during races, so I was still getting mile splits. Further on now into this marathon training block, I have not switched auto lap back on for any of the races that I've run in, and I'm learning to run completely by feel. So it's great to get the data once I've run. It's great to check Strava for the mile splits. It's great to see if I've negative split, positive split, even split. It's great to see the heart rate. It's great to see all of that, but I don't want to know that when I'm running, and I can't emphasize enough how good it is when you're running to know how you're feeling. When you're watching everyone around you, checking this, seeing what pace they're running, what their heart rate is, and everything else. It's very useful, but I can't emphasize enough how good it is to get in tune with your body. And the main thing that you want to take from that is basically learning where your breathing changes when you're running. So I like to run with pace. If we take a metric, whether it's power, whether it's heart rate, whether it's pace, whatever it is, if I'm going to do anything, it's going to be by pace. And I always kind of set myself some paces through my training so that I know roughly where I want to run for certain types of runs. Now for me, if I'm running completely by feel, I know the effort I need to put in to hit that pace, and when I can feel my breathing change, that's when I know, let's say for zone 1 and zone 2 runs, if I tip over what tends to be in terms of heart rate anywhere from 148 to 153, in and around that range, I know my breathing will change, and so I have to dial the run back and fall back under it. So whenever I go back and look on Strava at data and track my mouse along the run and see when my heart rate spikes up, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly where my breathing changed. Just going up that hill or just pushing the pace a little bit, whatever it is, I can tell when my breathing changes. So I know that that's my aerobic threshold around there, and my zone 1 and zone 2 runs need to stay below that. Similarly, when I get up to the top end, I know roughly around 168 to 172. In that realm is when my breathing changes. And I know once I've gone over there, I'm on a ticking timer as to how long I can hold that pace for. So I know again that I want to stay below 168 heart rate, or in terms of paces, I'm not going to go into paces for half marathons and 10Ks. But I know when I look at the data afterwards, if I tip into the 172s and above, I know that I've gone well over my threshold. So it's about learning where your breathing changes, learning to control your pace based on your breathing. It's an absolute game changer. You then use it in races. You can see how hard you're breathing, listen to other people breathing, understand that they're working a bit harder than you. It's all mind games, but it's also learning about yourself. So there we go. Those are the 5 things that I really feel have been key for me to become a faster runner, as well as training. Extra bits around the edge can really help, and hopefully they'll help you. As I mentioned in the beginning, I try to keep these tips a little bit different from what you might normally see. I know strength and conditioning is a little bit generic, but it's got to be thrown in there because it's made such a big difference. But learning to fuel when we're doing workouts, understanding our recovery and why we want to do it so that we can just keep that ball rolling and keep training week after week, all these things add together, plus learning our body and learning to run by feel, is such a massive thing. I'd love to hear from you guys what your thoughts are on this video. Have you found it helpful, or have you got any other tips to add? Please leave them down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, and let's get that discussion down there. I love to say in these videos that I think the comment section is always fantastic to share more knowledge that you guys have gained over the years of running for other people to watch this video, then scroll down there and leave their own comments for them to learn a little bit more about what can help them too. So that's it from me today, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider giving it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and as always, I'll see you on the next one. Until then.